Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on the Barratt London's proposals for Cloister Corner. Thank you for joining us. We will get started in just a minute or two. We'll just wait for any latecomers and then get started properly. Thank you. Right, so we've got quite a few people here already. So I think we'll get started. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on our proposals for Cloister Corner in North Acton. My name is Sam Griffiths. I'm from London Communications Agency, and I will be chairing the webinar today. We're also joined on the panel today by representatives from Barratt London, Allies and Morrison, and the planning consultants New Steer. So firstly, I'll just explain a little bit about the format of the webinar today. So after we introduce ourselves, Allies and Morrison will share a presentation on screen of our latest proposals. They'll talk you through the scheme as it stands, and we expect that will take between 15 and 20 minutes. Following the presentation, we will move into the Q&A, which is your opportunity to ask us questions about the proposals. So you can submit your proposals using the Q&A button on Zoom, which is in the black bar at the bottom of your picture on Zoom. If you click that, you can type in your questions anytime. They'll come through to us and we will answer them after the presentation. We will try to answer as many as we can over the next hour. So if it's okay, we'll just quickly introduce the members of the project team that are on the call today. So I've introduced myself already, Sam Griffiths from London Communications Agency. Nathan, do you want to introduce yourself next? Oh, you're on mute, Nathan, sorry.
You're quite right, I am. Sorry. Nathan Smith, Senior Development Manager at Barratt London.
And Marco?
Marco Colagiacomo from Allies and Morrison.
Finally, Rachel.
Hi everyone, Rachel Menjum, Senior Planner at New Steer.
Thanks, everyone. So just before we start the presentation, let me just remind you that all the information we're showing today on the proposals is available on our project website, which is www.cloistercorner.co.uk. That website also contains our digital survey, which you can use to give your feedback on our proposals. So I will now hand over to Marco from Allies and Morrison, who's going to share the presentation and take you through the proposals. Marco.
Yeah, good evening. I'm going to start sharing the screen. Take some time. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can. Yep.
Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to make it bigger. So welcome everyone, and oops, sorry, this is the team. I don't know if Nathan wants to have something.
Yeah, just thanks, Marco. Just to say a few words. I suspect most of you are familiar with who Barratt are, but just a little snippet. We're essentially the market leader in building quality homes across London, but also from Scotland down to the south coast of England. We are committed to delivering an exemplar scheme at our site, Gypsy Corner, and helping us achieve that is award-winning architects, Allies and Morrison, and planning consultants, New Steer. So with that in mind, I'll pass it straight back to Marco to get on with the presentation.
Okay, so just a quick overlook of the site, both from an area point of view and street point of view. I know that many of you might know the site, but I think is good for all the public to be to be aware of what's happening around the site. So as you can see in this picture, it's quite representative of the location of the site. Is facing the on lane and the A40 on the eastern side, with major developments happening on that side. And there are Cloister Road park views and Saisy Road terraced houses on the south and western side of our boundary. So the site is a transition between the scale of the terrace house and the major development, and the proposal needs to represent the transition between those two realities. Yeah, we've been quite a few times outside, and those are just some shots that we take when we were on site, to see just how different is the character, and the fact that we sit between two completely different areas with different characters, and we need to address both of them. So this is a picture from the A40. This is one from the crossing and Gypsy Corner. This is more the same location, but looking more southward. This is one from the let's say from the gateway, from the gate of the North Acton playing fields. So on the shoulder of the picture, we have the gate of the North Acton playing fields, and you can see how the transition of the scale of the two-story houses, and then the background, the new development. This is the junction between is the Cloister Road, and this is a zoom in on Cloister Road again, which is at the moment, yeah, with the brick wall and parking on the sides. And this is just to explain how the transition of those two scales is quite an important characteristic of the site. So this is looking back. So we are standing with the shoulder on the brick wall, looking backwards on the North Acton playing fields. And now we are moving along the north of, we are now on Parkview, and this is a street view from Parkview. So it's quite clear the transition from two to the tallest element of the new developments on the background. And this is one view from Hone Lane, very close to the junction of the A40. And this is just the last one, just to summarize how the scheme on the north has been interfacing, especially with the green corridor on the right, where they have a slip road and very tiny piece of green on facing the A40. This is a picture summarizing the development and the planning consent close to the area. And this is the existing consent, which actually is still valid. Do you want to add something, Rachel, on the existing?
Yeah, it's probably worth saying, I mean, I'm sure most of you are aware that there have been a couple of schemes approved on the site. The first originally included a mixed-use development, some of which was a hotel and some of it residential. That wasn't delivered due to the reason that there is a covenant on the site which restricts there being commercial uses, so it wasn't deliverable. The more recent approval was for 149 dwellings over 9 stories, and that included a basement car park that had 90 car parking spaces in it. Again, unfortunately, that wasn't deliverable purely due to the fact that it's not a viable scheme with the inclusion of a basement as well.
Okay, thanks. So going back to our key principle is They are mainly developing affordable homes for healing, which are needed, but also reconnected the area with the context, which we think in terms of urban design is always better connecting rather than excluding. And creating a buffer. The development will create a buffer between the A40s, the A40 and the neighbors, so we can have a look at the positive impact of the proposal. And then obviously having a look at sustainability targets, which are a must nowadays, and also this is linked with the architecture and the massing of the proposal. And again, here we are going more into the detail of the proposal. So we are talking about approximately 290 units, 35% of which will be affordable. And yeah, and we had a look at how can we better maximize the site and taking care of the context and linking the context with the wider area, not just with the immediate context, and also providing additional public space, which we know in this area there is quite a lack of public community space. So this proposal is adding approximately 1,000 square meters of public space in the heart of the scheme. And again, this was the starting point. How can we connect the scheme, not just with the close neighbor, but with the wider scheme, with the bigger picture of North Acton. And this was the first scheme, the first idea it comes on our mind, and I think is where we need to take the big picture of the site, not just the close context. And also we analyzed there is this major green infrastructure, which is a part of the benefit of the scheme, and we are trying to improve this. Zooming in more into the ground floor and how those spaces are working, you can see on the right hand side there is a diagram showing the two private courtyard and the public link in the east of the North Acton with the playing with the playing ground, but also with all the development on the western side. And yeah, this is a ground floor showing how those spaces can be planted and how can be experienced the ground floor and the link through the site. Sorry. Yes, this is a picture of how the link is going to has been imagined at the moment. So it's a double height space with a residential ancillary space on the left hand side, and this is a view from the A40 from the green corridor, looking inside the proposed scheme. And this is a ground floor plan, a landscape plan showing how the landscape is going to be, has been envisaged so far. So starting from the north, we have the green corridor here with the dedicated cycle lane, a dedicated public path, a green buffer, which will be available to all the public, and then the link through the site with in the main in the heart of the scheme. We are proposing this additional public realm, which will be landscape with child space at ground floor, accessible to everyone. And then on the left hand side, you can see the first residential amenity space, which will remain planted on the edge, and also in the middle, but we will provide both amenity and residential play space. And again, on the southern end on the site, we will have some planting and child space and residential amenity. And also we are going to provide a rooftop amenity just to make sure that this development is self-sufficient in terms of child space. This is sorry. This is another diagram showing the proposal and this benefit. This is in terms of noise. So on the left hand side, you can see the existing noise levels, and they are overall they are above the average and above what British standard is recommended for amenity space. And on the right hand side, you can see the new diagram with the proposal insert in the context, and all the noise is going to be the majority of the noise is going to be absorbed by the building along the A40. So this is one of the major benefit. And another thing is having a green buffer between the noisy road on the Orr Lane and Western Avenue and the new development that can be benefited by all the people that is passing through the area. In terms of massing, the proposal is as we said at the beginning, is a proposal that needs to consider the both end of the site. So on the western side, we are stepping down the massing to 2 stories and 4 stories in block E and F, and then we raise up the massing in the center of the scheme to starting from 5 to 10 in block A, 17 to 10 in block B, and 15. And when we drop down to 8 and in block C. This is the current view of from Cloister Road, and this is the view with the proposal. And we can start seeing in the foreground the mansion block, 4 stories here, and the layer of the massing in the background with the tall elements again in the background. This is a diagram showing how the buildings performs in terms of amenity space, and yeah, having those buildings on facing east-west, so they are on the north-south location. We can have a very good sunlight delight because the sun path allow us to have the majority of those space at the with a good amount of sunlight delight during day. This is during March, in the spring equinox. And going back to the massing, this is a view from Victoria Road. So it's from the, let's say, from on the way back from the tube station. And this is a view with the same view with the proposal insetting. And again, the massing is stepping down towards the neighbor and then stepping down again towards Cecil Road. And this is this is the delivery and parking strategy as we have envisaged so far. So the majority of them will happen on Parkview, but there will be parking. The majority of them, sorry, will be on Parkview. So we have 8 parking Undercroft, and there is a delivery bay which will serve block A and then B. And then we will have another parking and a delivery bay on Cloister Road, which is going to serve the rest of the block. So block E, F, C, and those 2 terrace houses on block D. I think just to, yeah, I don't know if Sam, you want to.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so this slide basically covers what many of you know already. We've been holding public consultation events. This is our last public consultation event for the moment. We've been holding in-person events on Saturday and Wednesday over the last week, which I know some of you have attended already. So once these events are complete and we've received feedback throughout March on our website, the team are going to be reviewing all the feedback in April, and then we're aiming to submit a planning application in May. And you can see there our contact details and our website, which I've already said. Marco. So that's the end of our presentation.
Yeah, sorry, I'm on mute. Yeah, that's the end of the presentation.
So I think if you just take the presentation down for the moment, Marco, if we need to show anything up again, we will. But yes, so that's our presentation done. Hopefully you all found it informative and helpful. So we're now going to move on to the Q&A part of the webinar. I can see we've already got some questions sent in already, so that's great. Just to remind you, you can submit your questions using the Q&A button, which is at the bottom of the screen on Zoom, and you can type in your questions and it will come through to us, and we'll answer it over up till 7:30. So we're going to start with a question that we received in advance from Sheila, and she asks, is it necessary to break the wall in Cloister Road? And what is the alternative to it? So that's discussing the proposed pedestrian route from Cloister Road through to Western Avenue. So Marco, would you be able to answer that for Sheila?
Well, Marco, shall I jump in? Sorry, it's Hendrik from MS Morrison as well. Just to, and Marco can chip in, but just to answer that question on the wall, no, it's not necessary to break the wall. We can keep the wall it is, the way it is, and we can develop at the back of the wall. But we, as Marco said in the presentation, for us, it is really about the benefits that we can bring to the wider community, of which one is access to public space in there. Obviously, for some people, it will be important to get a shorter route to the main road, to where the buses are. And then if you want to go beyond that, it's a sort of pleasant connection. If we leave the barrier up or the wall up, we do feel responsible as designers and as developers to make a positive contribution to Cloister Road. So nothing is given yet. But if we do keep it closed, we probably will take down the wall and build something better there, so that it is a better end to the street. At the moment, we don't feel just having a big blank wall is the best end to end that road. So we think that the benefits outweigh the negatives, but we are entirely open to consider alternatives to not take it down. The scheme doesn't depend on it to be taken down. I don't know if anybody else wants to add something to that.
Thanks, Hendrik. So I think we'll move on to some of the questions. We've got quite a lot of questions submitted in the Q&A box, so that's great. I'll start off with the first question we got, which is from Blarina. She asks, is Cloister Road wide enough to absorb the traffic? And what assessment has been made of this? So that's I guess regarding an possible increase in servicing traffic along Cloister Road. So I'm not sure who would like, maybe perhaps Nathan or Rachel, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to answer, but obviously Hendrik, jump in if you want. I think firstly, just to emphasise, the proposed route is predominantly for pedestrians, as in the actual route through the site is pedestrians and cyclists only, not for vehicle traffic. At the moment, we've got a proposal for the inclusion of a disabled car parking space and a potential delivery bay at the end of Cloister Road. That's something that we're working up the delivery and servicing strategy at the moment. We've got quite a lot of feedback on the various consultation events about the views from residents on Cloister Road about having the servicing bay in its current location. So it's something that we are reviewing as a team. So in terms of the road being wide enough for the current proposals, yes, it is, but it's not set in stone at this point.
Just to add to that, there's a question further down about would you consider an access on Horn Lane? Yes, we would. We don't think it's technically feasible at the moment with regard to planning regulations, TfL regulations, but we are exploring them and we're going to continue to explore them. But we think there's constraints with regard to that. But if that turned out to be achievable, then certainly that's something we'll happily pursue. Yeah.
Great, thanks both of you. Now moving on to a question asking about the sunlight impact of the new buildings. The question is, given how high the buildings are, have you accounted for the loss of sunlight this will cause to nearby housing? How much will that impact the heating costs and quality of life of neighbours living to the north and the northwest of the site? And do you plan to remunerate this impact to people's lives and people's property? So maybe Marco or Hendrik, you could explain a little bit about, go into a bit more detail about what we showed in the presentation about how the sunlight is going to be affected and how we designed the scheme to deal with that, just to start off answering that question.
Okay, well, at the moment, the diagrams only show how we affect the space within the site. So fair enough, people want to know how it affects their gardens. But what the diagrams does do is is show that our gardens are very well lit, and therefore it shouldn't really impact the gardens to the west, because the scheme is to the east of the gardens. But what I just want to reassure everybody is that that's a process we now going through. Now that we have the massing established and the heights of the buildings, we can now start to test all of the impact, and we have computer modeling that will move from the morning to the evening, showing how the shadows move and see what impacts it has on windows. And often in schemes, if it affects somebody's windows severely or their spaces, we have to change the scheme. So it's a little bit early to tell exactly what the impact is, but rest assured that gets tested very rigorously over the next couple of months.
I think it's fair to say, Hendrik, as well, I think the site benefits favourably from its orientation of a north-south orientation. So naturally, our site does not necessarily project any significant overbearing or overshadowing on neighbouring properties. Now, where this does exist, if it exists and we're determining that, then we'll address it. But we benefit from the north-south orientation. So much of it is mitigated right from the start.
Yeah. And we keep the tallest buildings away from the northern corner, so that the people directly to the north, which is probably the ones that will be most affected, is less affected, if affected at all. But we are doing those testings, and we will have those answers in the near future.
Thanks, Hendrik. A similar question from, sorry, I don't know your name, but somebody with the initials KA in attending the meeting, asking about the impact on sunlight on the for properties on Parkview and Mozart Gardens. I think the answer is probably we've probably already covered that one in terms of there's going to be much more detail available in the planning application on all that kind of thing. We've received quite a few questions about parking. One from Eric asking about how many parking spaces are planned and will access be from Parkview, and a similar question from Maria about where do, if there's only disabled parking, where do you expect other residents will park their vehicles that they will inevitably own? So that for two questions on a fairly similar theme there. I think would Rachel or Nathan, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, that's fine. So currently the scheme is what's known as car free, albeit we are providing spaces on site for disabled car parking only. That's a planning policy requirement that we're meeting. So I believe there are 8 disabled car parking spaces currently.
9, sorry,
oh,
1, 8 under Croft and 1. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So there's 8 that will be accessed via Parkview, and then there's the single space that's to be accessed via Cloister Road. So in terms of where other residents will park, it's very common that when you have a proposed development that's car free, that you can put restrictions within what's known as the Section 106 agreement that can prevent future residents from having a parking permit to utilise local streets. So I'm sure that's something that we'll be discussing with the council, and that Barratt are probably aware of and have done in other schemes in London, because that is the way that things are nowadays. So one thing I would add, though, is just emphasising again that the previous consented scheme obviously had a number of car parking spaces, but the impact that would have had in terms of traffic, I hope you can see that the proposal that we've got now, it would be a significant improvement on that.
Just to add from a Barratt perspective, I guess, when it comes to marketing the homes and engaging with potential customers who come into the show home and showroom, it's going to be very clearly marketed as this is a car-free site. If you own a car, this isn't the development for you. We've got great transport links here, tube, bus, road, even for taxis and Ubers and things like that. But if you own a car, this really isn't the development for you. So that's certainly how it's being managed, along with the planning constraints, where people who live on our site, as and when they move in, they're not going to be able to apply for a parking permit in the local roads.
Thank you. Our next question is from Vinesh. He asks, how have you dealt with the acoustic and pollution issues along the A40 with regards to the private amenity spaces? The images show projecting balconies. Have you considered winter gardens or recessed balconies? Hendrik and Marco, would you be able to answer that?
I mean, at the moment, we concentrate most of the homes into the courtyard where we possibly can, and where we have northern and southern aspect, we move the balconies away from the road. Obviously, pollution does tailor off as you get higher up. So higher up on the buildings, pollution has less impact. At the moment, we are looking at the balconies. The few that has to be at lower level onto Cloister Road. For us, the main thing is to provide enough amenity space for those people who live there, who can use the gardens, etc. And those are totally protected by the new building. So it's really about providing enough alternative amenity space. But yes, we are considering how we design those balconies, and that will also come out in the detail in the planning application. They will very likely have solid fronts and things like that to help to deal with the pollution onto the street. Projecting balconies versus recessed balconies, all of those things we are considering at the moment. So.
Great, thanks, Hendrik. Our next question is from Anne. She asks, what percentage of the units will be dual aspect, and similarly, what percentage will be 3-bed homes? And then asks, how do the sizes compare to the London plan minimum? So Rachel, would you be able to answer that?
I think Hendrik or Marco are probably best placed to say the dual aspect element. Yeah,
so at the moment, the scheme, the proposal is achieving around 65–70% of dual aspect, and the percentage of 3 beds, percent of 3 beds is approximately 20% overall, but most of the 3 beds will be affordable. So the affordable 3 bed is 45%. I think, 45%, around 45% of 3 beds are affordable. And then how do size compare? We are designing the scheme to comply with London plan minimum standard.
Thanks, Marco. Our next question is from Maria. She asks, why is there a stairway on the Cloister Road side of the site? And she asks, is the site higher than the road? I presume in terms of, it means a stairway from Cloister Road to where the site starts. And she asks, won't that increase the height of the blocks from a view perspective from Cloister Road?
I think that's just a misinterpretation of the plan, the way the paving is laid out. I can see how it might look like stairs, but Andrew, Mark, I'll sort of over to you on that.
Yeah,
No,
there's no stairs. It's
no,
flat.
the same is the site is flat, the development is flat. Yeah.
Okay, so our next question asks on a similar theme to our earlier question about Cloister Road. They say it seems to be too narrow and already overcrowded with cars to serve as a delivery road car park, and ask would Horn Lane not be better as an alternative? On a slightly similar theme to what we discussed earlier, but this is specifically about servicing from the end of Cloister Road. I don't know who would like to answer that.
I think that the answer is the same as before. We are reconsidering all of that and looking into that. And we have difficulty with TfL on Horn Lane and the A40, as everybody knows, they're busy roads and there's cycle lanes, etc. But we are considering that at the moment. So we're looking at alternative servicing so we can avoid Cloister Road.
Yes, there have been quite a few questions on that, on all the same themes. So hopefully that sort of covers most of them. Our next question here is from Alina. She asks, are you planning any shops or public facilities on site? And a second question, it seems that all the green space is going to be private except a row of trees next to the highway. Could you explain where the public green space is? And also, could you show how this development will impact shade on neighbouring houses? So I think that last question we've already covered in terms of sunlight. Your second question about the public space, that is going to be the proposed pedestrian route through from Cloister Road to Western Avenue. That's what we're referring to there in terms of the public space. And the other parts of the site shown on the plan will be private amenity space for the new residents. I don't know, Nathan, would you maybe be able to answer the question about shops and public facilities? I know obviously at Western Circus down the road, there's a new supermarket being put in.
Yeah, we've had a really good look at this as it was set out in Marco's presentation or from Rachel earlier on. It's been difficult for previous developers to bring forward commercial uses, the hotel specifically in one of the previous proposals. And we had a really good look at this, actually, a really good legal review. And the covenant that prevents commercial being delivered at this site is there. And it has prevented previous proposals coming through. We still think it's a considerable constraint to delivering commercial at this site. So whilst you know, we wouldn't necessarily sort of engage this debate about what it could deliver, the reality seems to be that there are legal constraints in delivering any shops on our site. Safe to say, what we are trying our best to do is engage the ground floor, and that, you know, might be through a number of means, a residence gym or a residence business lounge. There's obviously the public realm, open to the public. There's some play as you go bits and pieces for children to engage with as they walk through the Western Avenue. So that's the answer to your question, is no, but we've had a good look at it, and there's you know, adequate reasons why we can't deliver commercial or shops at this site.
Thanks, Nathan. So our next question, there's a couple of questions on a similar theme about supermarkets, which I think we've answered already. There's a question from Maria here asking, will there be a doctor's surgery on site? We don't have any plans at the moment to have a doctor's surgery on this site. We understand a few people who we spoke to at the exhibition are concerned that the doctor's surgery on Cloister Road is already very full. So part of what will happen with the planning application, if it's consented, is that Barratt will pay what's called the Community Infrastructure Levy, which is money that the council can spend to invest in local services. And I believe actually at the One Portal Way development, which is by Imperial College in North Acton, I believe they're proposing a doctor's surgery as part of their plans at the moment. So that's another alternative in the area that could be coming forward in the future, but there's no plans to provide that on this particular site. John sent in a question asking, would you consider a service entrance from Horn Lane instead? I think we probably already covered that because it's something that we would definitely consider, but it's a matter of our ongoing discussions with the council around they have concerns around safety and things like that. So we've had another question here from Anne. She asks, what has the feedback been from the design review panel? The design is not fantastic, but mundane. So I don't know, could we, I don't know who would be best to explain the DRP feedback, maybe Marco or Hendrik?
I could start with that, and then others can chip in. We've presented to the DRP at a very early stage, and we presented to them options and how to deal with the scheme. They had very positive feedback in terms of how we deal with the massing, how we layering the scheme in terms of its massing. They were very positive about the link through. They've also, we had alternative options for the link before, and which they didn't necessarily like. So we've changed it to the orientation of the two buildings next to Cloister Road in response to their comments. So we had a very good conversation with them, and it was an early presentation where the scheme wasn't fully developed yet. So we are going back in April to show them progress, and obviously once we've agreed certain parameters, we can then start to make the scheme more fantastic, as they say, and get the elevations developed, and how the buildings are going to look will now be developed for that meeting.
Thanks, Hendrik. So just to explain, just to answer a few more of the questions, this question here asking, is the development car free? Yes, it is. As we explained earlier, there are some disabled parking spaces, but apart from that, we're proposing a car-free development. A question from Maria asking, how long will it take approximately to build this project? Nathan, would you be able to answer that one quickly?
Yeah, I would estimate a project of this scale, Barratt could quite satisfactorily build this in 2.5 years. I'd point out that one of the things that would speed up the build is we don't have to build, a single or a double basement, which would involve, huge amounts of very heavy vehicles coming and taking muck away. So because we don't have to do that, that certainly speeds up the build, decreases significantly the amount of works traffic on the site. But I would expect us from start to finish to be completed in 2.5 years.
Thanks. A question from Rachel asking, when are you looking to submit a planning application for the proposals? We are aiming to submit at the moment in May, in a couple of months' time. A question from Dominic, how does the towers affect the surrounding houses' sunlight? The chart shows just your buildings. I think, as we explained earlier, that's something that is going to be, we're doing a lot of work on, and we will be able to share with you, and that will be shown in full detail as part of the planning application when it's submitted in May. A question from Maria here. Do you know the maximum person density this site would or could provide? Presume a mixture of 1, 2, and 3 bed apartments. So taking those into consideration in terms of the average number of people who would live in them. So yeah, I think asking just about, is there an estimate of the maximum density this site could provide? I don't know who, if anyone would take a stab at that.
We normally have the bed spaces, and now I'm looking at Marco to see if his schedule can tell us how many bed spaces there are.
No,
yeah, but we can definitely give that answer by once we've settled the mix exactly and how many 1s, 2s, and 3s. But at average, I would say estimate 3 people.
3 person, per flat.
Person per flat, and that will average out the smaller studios where there might be only 1 person, and the 3 beds where there might be 3 or 4 or 5 people in those. So I think a good average is 3 people. So if you have 290 units and then times 3, so 600, 700, and just over 700. My brain is frazzled at the end of the day, but yeah, so I think a good average is 3 per unit.
Great, thank you. So our next question is from Dominic about the height. Will you consider lowering the height of the buildings similar to the original Clearview plans and not to tower over local residents?
I'll pick that up to start with. I don't know if anyone would chip in after me. I mean, from a Barratt perspective, we think this site has got capacity, certainly in planning policy, pure planning policy terms, to deliver more than the extant consents. There's a clear demand for homes, throughout London. Certainly a very clear demand for affordable homes. Our site is intended to deliver a high proportion of affordable homes between affordable rent and shared ownership, where you part rent, part buy. The site acts as a very useful conduit between the extremely tall buildings on the eastern flank and the lower story on the western flank. So I guess my conclusion is that we're forming the premise that we're content with the proposals broadly that we're presenting to you. Nothing's fixed in stone, clearly. That's why we're presenting proposals to you, but we think we're content with the way the proposals are proceeding at the moment, subject to the full consultation process, taking that all on board, having a good think about things, and then having a chat with the council about what that feedback looked like, and asking them their opinion as well.
Thanks, Nathan. Another question from Rachel on a similar theme to the earlier question about as the area is already subject to extensive redevelopment, is the existing or projected population density of the area taken into consideration? Someone may be able to give a more detailed answer, but the site is allocated within Ealing's local plan, which does consider these things in the round as a site that can deliver a significant amount of new homes. I don't know if you've had anything to add to that, Rachel, or.
No, I think that's a good point that you've made there. As part of any development, we're going to be submitting various technical documents that consider the cumulative effects of the development, but in terms of the number of people, again, that leads back to what Sam was saying earlier about Barratt London making the Section 106 contributions that will go towards improvements to local amenities and services. So in terms of the actual application, we're not able to calculate the number of people coming forward in all of the different developments, but we're certainly taking them into consideration.
Thank you. So our next question is from David. When are the flats in the different blocks expected to be completed and put on the market for sale? What is the target pricing for the flats, and will they be sold ahead of completion? So I guess two questions there. One about are the blocks going to be completed at different times in different phases, and a second question about when are they going on sale, and do we have any idea of a rough target price, Nathan?
Yeah, so if you don't mind, I'll come back to pricing. I'll collect that information from a file that's open on my file, so we'll come back to it after a few questions. I'll just jot that down. But the first two questions, yeah, I would expect this site to be phased in perhaps 3 phases, broken down into 3 tranches or phases. So individually, people might move in after about 15-18 months, then a few more people 3-4 months later, and then the final lot of residents moving in around 2.5 years in. So that answers that question. When will the flats be put on the market? The sales campaign is likely to kick off this summer. Just really, saying this is what we're doing. If you'd like to express an interest, get in touch and we'll take your details down, and we'll come back to you when we've got some more useful information to you. So in the event you were interested, you'll be able to probably register your interest certainly by no later than the end of this summer. And I'll come back to you on values. I'll jot these down and we'll get these out certainly before the end of the session.
Thanks, Nathan. Another question from David. Will there be concierge or security services for the area in and around the estate? There will be concierge services as part of the development for most of the new homes, and obviously the appropriate security as well. But that will be for the development itself.
Yeah, just to add to that, the sort of scale of the scheme, means that there'll be a full-time estate management presence. So there'll be a management presence, typical office hours and, extended as and when need be. There's a very robust management in terms of litter picking, sort of cleaning up and washing windows and making sure everything's sort of spick and span and there's no problems.
Yep. Next question, another question from Maria here. Good question. Have you liaised with TfL about North Acton Tube Station and whether they have plans to upgrade the station to take into account the increased traffic when all the towers and other works are built? Currently, there isn't even a lift there, so buggies and families will be hampered. I think we all recognise the shortcomings of North Acton Station. I don't know, Nathan, if there's anything we can say about that, about the station. I know it's something that everyone, every developer in the area is very aware of as a problem.
Yeah, sorry, I was busy jotting down the numbers. Let me quickly read the question. It's
just about upgrades to North Acton Tube Station. And
yeah,
if we talk to TfL.
This is essentially done through the local authority. So TfL would comment on the planning application. They would say, our station is in close proximity. The entrance doesn't meet the requirements for additional capacity, or the platforms need lengthening, and from them discussions, charges are levied on the developer through what Rachel's described as the Section 106 agreement. So where a need is identified from TfL for additional resource, TfL will lobby for that additional resource, either in whole or in part, to come through the developer as part of the planning permission process.
Thanks, Nathan. So our next question simply asks how high the building is going to be. You can see on our website we have the diagram that Marco showed earlier, which shows the heights of each of the buildings as proposed as they are at the moment. That ranges between blocks that are 4 and 5 stories nearest to Parkview and Cloister Road, up to the taller blocks, which are 15 and 17 stories. So please, I don't think we'll show that again right now, but all the information is on our website of the heights as they stand at the moment. A question here from Eric regarding security. He asks, are the courtyards open? He would be concerned of loitering, especially in the evenings. So I think that refers to the private amenity space, and they're not going to be open to the public.
Yeah. Yeah, they will be locked with gates, and yeah, they will be fully secured.
Another question from Blarina. She asked, can I find timelines for the project on the website? Yes, you can. It's the same information as what we showed you earlier at the end of the presentation regarding submission and possible start on the site. Obviously, Nathan explained a bit earlier that a development like this he'd expect would be roughly 2.5 years. So that's the information we have at the moment on timelines. So our next question is from Sheila. She asks, your exhibition boards say that the site sits on the boundary of the southern gateway. Do you agree that the site is outside and not inside of the boundary of what Ealing refer to as the Park Royal Southern Gateway in Ealing's development site, DPD? Rachel, would you be able to cover that one?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, we know that the site falls outside of that specific allocation. I think it's worth highlighting, as has already been said at some point this evening, that the site itself is allocated for development, and we and Ealing see the site as a good opportunity to work as a transition between the Park Royal area and the tall buildings that are emerging on that side of the A40 and the existing domestic scale dwellings on this side of the A40. So yes, we are aware that it falls outside of that location.
Thanks. A question here from Uzma. Would it not have been better to reduce the height of the housing in keeping with the local housing on Cloister Road and Parkview? Will residents not lose their privacy? So I think we've already covered the point about the height in terms of the ability to deliver homes and density on the site. Maybe Hendrik or Marco, you could speak a little bit about privacy and the impact of those who live very near to the site and how that's been thought about in the designs.
I mean, Marco can tell us the distances in a minute, but mainly what we are doing is we will consider every window and every new unit on the site in terms of where their windows are placed and what their outlook is. So firstly, we're setting the buildings back from the existing neighborhood, and we'll talk about distances in a minute. In terms of the design of the homes, we will make sure that we consider each one of those. And then we are thinking about balconies, because I think balconies is the one thing where people might feel most overlooked when people go out on their balcony. So we are looking at the design of the balconies, and yet again, we will provide some diagrams about how we orientate the view from people's living rooms through their balconies by making solid fronts to some of the balconies, etc. So we really consider that. Marco, do you want to just add the distance from Block B, for instance, to the nearest homes?
For example, from Block B, the tallest element and the closest house is around 40 meters.
So within when planning terms, and you're more likely to be overlooked from your neighbor behind, from their upstairs, than from the towers, because they will be much closer to your garden than our buildings.
Thanks, everyone. A comment from Anne here. She rightly points out that Ealing is not implemented still, so any provision would be through section 106. Sorry, that was my error earlier on. Happy to correct that.
If I can just add to that, though, the development will be paying mayoral sill, and that often goes towards some of the TfL projects that people have already raised questions on. So yes, there is an Ealing sill, but there is mayoral sill as well as the section 106.
Thanks, Rachel. A comment from another Rachel here. She says, I note that a gradient effect has been taken to building height starting at the end of Cloister Road and moving towards Horn Lane. Why has the same approach not been taken to Park View? Your plans show 5 and 10 story buildings at the end of Park View. I mean, I'm happy to pass over to Hendrik and Marco, but obviously the site is much narrower at the top, which should sort of limits the amount of space we have, and obviously 10 stories is much lower than the taller buildings, the 17-story buildings. But I don't know if you have a more elegant answer.
Well, we have a similar approach where the first bit of the building is only a single story, and then it goes up, and then it goes up yet again as we get closer to the corner. So we are having the same approach of stepping. And as I said earlier on, once we started testing the impact of overshadowing, we might have to carve some more of that off. But it is not as dramatic as down to Cloister Road, where we go down to 2 stories, but we're having a very similar approach.
Thanks. So a question here from Dominic about construction, which we haven't been asked about yet. So this is our first question, asking about how will you help the homes close by that will be affected by construction, for example, vibration from the heavy machines causing cracking. I don't know who would be best. Maybe Nathan, would you be best placed to take that one?
Yeah, happy to take that on. So prior to any work being carried out, we'll be undertaking a condition survey of all our closest neighbours, very closely photoing the elevations, the gable ends, the windows. We'll agree them, with our neighbours. So if any, cracks did occur, and I'm sure they won't, but if any cracks did occur, then, we could agree that actually, they might have been as a result of vibration. Now, this often doesn't happen because, the effects, you can use a continued flight auger. No one really sort of pile drives anymore. Plus the fact that, there's very little excavation here. Clearly, we're going to need piles, but as I say, it's often used with a continued flight auger, which is, a drill going down like that, as opposed to the pile driver motion. So in short, we'll do a stock condition survey of our closest neighbours. We'll agree that with you, and then check that periodically through the course or through the course of the development.
It's probably worth adding that as part of the planning application, and it's always conditioned, we will be submitting a construction management plan, which will also set levels of the acceptable levels of vibration, noise, hours of operation, and so on. So that document will be in the public domain once it's submitted.
Thanks both. So I'm working through the questions as quickly as I can. I appreciate it's just gone 7:30, so we'll stay with you a little longer to answer as many questions as we can. I'm working through them roughly chronologically, so apologies. Sometimes by the time I get to one, it's already been answered earlier on by a very similar question. So I'm working through them as fast as I can. Question here saying, when would you start building? That will be, if dependent on the planning process this year, we're looking at early 2023 to start on site. Another question from Sheila here. She asks, have you had pre-application advice from Ealing saying this site is suitable for tall buildings? Have planning officers explained the basis for this advice?
So I'll jump in on that one. So we've had quite extensive pre-application meetings with Ealing to date, as well as the design review panel that's previously been mentioned. In terms of justifying height, the existing consent is already considered to be a tall building within planning policy. Planning policy defines tall buildings as being anything above 6 stories. So there is an existing precedent for tall buildings on the site. So we have that as a basis. And then moving on from that, London plan policy, does say that tall buildings can be acceptable where you can demonstrate that the impacts, are acceptable from the development, and we're going to be following all of those tests and submitting all of the technical reports to demonstrate that. So today, we've been having a very productive and positive conversation with Ealing, and have got to a comfortable position in relation to heights.
Thanks, Rachel. Our next question is my next question here. Asked, will you come back to residents with your revised proposals before submitting the planning application? Once we've reflected on all the feedback and made any changes that we're going to, then we will update all the residents on the changes that have been made. If you sign up on our website to our mailing list or complete our survey, then we'll let you know as soon as that happens, and let you know of any changes to the scheme, and that will be in advance of us submitting a planning application. Another question from Sheila here, asking, can you confirm the site area? I presume in hectares. I don't know if we know that off the top of our heads.
It's 0.8 hectares. We worked it out yesterday. So yeah, it's just under. So that is 8,000 square meters. Yeah, I can work out the feet if she wants to know in feet as well, but that's.
There's a similar question from Sheila about, well, the next question on is, can you confirm the expected net density of your development, just to test your
it's around 370 units hectare.
Okay, 370 units a hectare.
375, yeah, it's roughly there. Yeah.
Just in relation to density, if you don't mind me just jumping in a moment, it's worth flagging that the density matrix has been removed from the London plan and planning policy. So although we know what the dwellings per hectare is, that's no longer a planning policy consideration, and actually we're required to design a scheme that optimizes the site, and that is what we believe we have done.
Thanks, Rachel. Our next question is from Blarina. Have you made any assessment of security or police implications of the increase of population in the area? I don't know who would be best to answer that.
I'll answer that one. We will meet with the Secure by Design officer for the area before we submit the planning application and discuss the project with them. So yeah, we will consult. We haven't consulted with the police yet, but we will do that once we got more detail on the project, so they can advise us on if there's any problems.
Thanks. Another question here asking, will you be planting semi-mature trees as part of the landscaping? We don't have the landscape architects on the call, but Alice Morrison might be able to answer that.
I mean, we want to be as ambitious as possible with the tree planting, especially on the busy roads on the A40, because smaller trees will simply not survive the pollution. So wherever we can afford, we will plant semi-mature trees because they have a much better chance of surviving than two smaller trees. So yes, we're trying to increase the size of the trees as much as possible.
Thanks. And another question, quite a few questions from Sheila actually, about the site allocation and the planning authority. I think it might be best if we it's quite detailed, so we might be best to reply to you on email of that, Sheila, conscious of time, and it's probably a easier format for us to answer those questions. So if that's okay, we'll get back to you on email about that tomorrow. Moving on, another question asking, are all the properties for sale or are some to rent, and are you marketing the flats abroad? Nathan.
Okay, so very quickly, Barratt operate a for sale model. We don't typically rent properties. Safe to say there is a quota of our new homes being made available to the council, and the council are offering up the best part of half or 60% of that quota for affordable rent. So Barratt don't operate a rent model. We sell properties, but there's a very decent number of our homes going to the council, which will be available for affordable rent purpose. What was the other question?
Will the flats be marketed abroad?
That depends, really. It's not untypical for developers to take marketing abroad. However, if there's significant demand in the local area, that would mean there's no reason for us to do that. So I'm not saying we're not going to do that at this stage, but if there's a useful, decent demand for properties, that would mean that we probably might not have a requirement to do that.
Thanks, Nathan. So a question here from John. Would you agree you don't need to do extra work on sunlight analysis? Your software can easily show the public space at any time of day and where the shadows lie across the whole area. Not showing that now is a PR decision, is it not? I don't know if you could explain how your software works.
I'll let the architects jump in, but we've got a third-party consultant from Avison Young who's doing the much more comprehensive sunlight and daylight assessment, and they've only just mapped the site comprehensively, and that will feed into the architect's model. I don't know if you want to pick that up any further, Hendrik.
Yeah, it's just a little bit too early to show all of that. The computer modeling, you're absolutely right. We can show all of that, and we can show how the shadows move. We just don't have the information yet. It does take time. It might be computers, but it still takes time to produce the information. So it will be available shortly.
Thanks. Our next question here just asks if we have any idea who the management company is going to be for the properties once completed. I presume the answer is no, Nathan.
So Barratt have got a small framework of management companies. We don't know who it is at this stage, but certainly all of the management companies that Barratt uses, give us and the residents a very robust performance. I can see the question goes on. A lot of new builds result in significant trash being left around littering the area. That's certainly not my experience with any Barratt development I've been on. We do and have done a lot of work with First Port Management Company recently, and my experience with them is that they're exceptionally good, especially in things like picking up litter.
Thanks, Nathan. Question from Vanessa: could the access of the community to the green spaces and the kids spaces be improved? As the proposal stand, the access is restricted to residents only. So that's a slightly different question from the others, but I think it's fair to say there is public space and restricted space in the scheme, and some of the play space and the green space will be the public space that we're proposing through the middle of the site. Anything to add to that, Hendrik or Marco?
No, it's just to say that 1,000 square meters inside the site, which is off the busy road, will be sufficiently, will be nice green space, and there will be child play space in there. So if that link happens in the end, that will be fully accessible to the public. And then obviously along the road, we don't want to encourage play space and all those things, but we do want to make the green corridor running north-south as accessible as possible and as pleasurable as possible. So there will be incidental play. So if you happen to walk up there, kids can play. So it will be a significant improvement to play space, and but also just place for all ages to sit down and rest and all of that sort of stuff and enjoy green space.
Thanks. Question from John. Do the shared ownership residents who might only own 20% of their properties have to pay 100% of any possible remediation costs, as with the industry's cladding scandal? It's probably a fairly hypothetical question in the case of this development, but I don't know if you can say anything on that, Nathan.
Yeah, no, I certainly know the reference. I'd say, Barratt's probably been a market leader in its response to this, series of events that's sort of materialised over the last few years. You've said they only might own 20%. I know that's on the face of it, that's how it looks like, but essentially it's like they've got quite a significant mortgage. That's how the banks see it. So they do own it outright, albeit they own a 20% equity. We're certainly not expecting any significant remediation costs. Long-term maintenance is planned through sinking funds via your service charge, and they would pay into that sinking fund in the normal way like any other resident would do.
Thanks, Nathan. So I think we're coming towards the end of most of the questions that have mostly been submitted. So we'll go for about another 5 minutes or so and try and finish off all the questions we can. I should say that if we do miss it, we'll try and do all that we can here. If we miss any, then we're very happy to reply to you over email. And as I said, there have been a couple that have already been answered or been answered earlier in the session that I haven't read out again. But there's been 1 or 2 questions about the possibility of a footpath over the A40. Vanessa asked, have there been any discussions or plans about that? I don't know if anyone would like to explain, would like to talk about that.
I could start by saying we are certainly, we've talked to the council about it. There's no plans to deliver the bridge as part of the scheme, but there is certainly a space left for it to land. So, and on some of the drawings, you might see a square drawn for the bridge. So what we're trying to do is not to exclude that opportunity to happen in the future, but this scheme is not delivering the bridge, and it's really up to TfL and the council about if it will be delivered, but we certainly not preventing it from happening in the future.
Thanks, Hendrik. A question from Dominic asking, where will the council's allocation be on the site? I presume that refers to the affordable housing and the social housing. Where will it be located?
Onto Park View. I mean, we could circulate a drawing, but at the moment, the affordable rent is onto Park View. Mark, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, at the moment they are there. But yeah, as soon as we review the massing going forward, we might adjust the tenure location too. Yeah.
A question here about submitting how and where can we submit complaints, feedback about any specific elements of this or other developments in the area. Well, for a start, we are running our own consultation at the moment, which is feedback that we're going to evaluate once the consultation closes at the end of March. In terms of the planning process, once we submit a planning application, the council will carry out their own statutory consultation, which is when they'll get in touch with you and all members, all neighbours and residents who are allowed to submit their comments on the application, which will be taken into consideration by the authority when they make a decision on the scheme. So as I say, we're hoping to submit in May, so that would likely start from May or June. Another question here from Sheila. She just asks, our understanding is that this location is part of Ealing's site allocation, OIS3, Western Avenue, sites south of Parkview to north of the railway. Are we mistaken about this? I don't know if Rachel, would you be able to answer that one?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I can't remember the exact, policy number off the top of my head, but the site is allocated as part of a series of sites that were previously TfL-owned sites. I think it's worth flagging that we're aware that the site is allocated for commercial uses, but it does say that, residential will be acceptable on the site. But as previously discussed, we're not able to deliver the commercial element because of the covenant.
Thanks, Rachel. Just going through to see if there are any more questions we can answer now.
Just while you're doing that, Sam, I'll just touch on values because I missed that previously. So we've based values typically off our site that we're developing about a kilometre and a half further south on the A40. Nothing in London's cheap anymore. I expect we all are aware of that. But a large studio to a 3-bedroom accommodation goes from 450 to 650, 700,000 pounds.
Thanks, Nathan. That's helpful. So I think we will probably bring it to a close there. We've been going for an hour and a quarter, and we've answered a lot of questions, hopefully, which you all found helpful. Hopefully you've all found it helpful. We'll go back through the chat, and if there's anything outstanding, which there may well be, we'll make sure to get back to you via email. You're very welcome to email your questions to us directly, and the team will respond to you. Our email address is cloistercorner@londoncommunications.co.uk. And you can also go on our website and fill out our survey. You can use that to give your feedback, and you can also use it to sign up to our mailing list. And if you do, we'll keep you updated on what's happening with the scheme, any changes that are made, and when it's submitted as a planning application. So do that if you'd like to be kept up to date. So I think we'll bring it to a close there. But as I say, please get in touch with us over email if you'd like to ask us any more questions. Hopefully you've all found this helpful. Sorry, there is a question actually I've just seen from Sheila asking about recording of the webinar. We're very happy, I think, to upload a recording of this webinar for people to watch on our website. So we'll let you know about that, but I don't think that should be a problem. And yeah, I think we'll bring it to an end there. So thank you very much. As I say, we'll make sure we come back to you with any questions. I think there have been a few questions that have been in a very similar theme to others we've answered. So if you haven't had your exact question answered, we apologize, but just to avoid repetition, we've tried to group some questions together because there have been an awful lot of people asking questions, a lot of questions, which is great, but has needed a bit of management. So please email us with anything specific. I think we can call it a day there. So thank you very much for joining us and for all your questions. And I hope you have a good evening. Thank you.